All right, again, here we go with Vox. Appreciate it for joining. And so now we are going to do the second half for Muzzle Run. This is going to be a two-parter, maybe a three-parter. We'll see how long it extends. But this one today is going to be Muzzle Run, stats and breeders, right?
That's right. Stats and breeders, kind of just getting familiar with how the different stats on your racers affect how the dogs perform on the various different track types or distances,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of how to hunt for the best possible combos of which breeders to racers to prioritize, getting those dogs that actually will perform and win some money instead of the ones that seem like they should but just fall flat.
Yeah, I feel like that's been happening to me lately, and I know I was talking to you a little bit about that on some of the spotted and riff, and then I just started getting confused. So I guess we'll just start from the somewhat the beginning. How would you recommend
Yep.
on that?
So a good way to get a baseline familiarity with how the dogs race on the tracks is by understanding what each of the stats that are both visible and the list of potential hidden intangible stats that we're not seeing. The devs have said, there are things we don't see. What it is, whether they are just flat out hidden traits, we don't know. It's kind of the secret sauce that they leave up to the player base to figure out. But there's a lot of different players that have been around a very long time that track trends, and they see what works and the way dogs and certain breed types run. They correlate these stats through these trends, and you can actually go through and learn a little bit more about how each stat affects the races. And then as you do that, you begin to start to see how the different breeds with those different stats line up to the tracks and how they perform. And when you start to get a grasp of how it all connects, that's when you'll better know, hey, when I pull this dog, if I pull a porter, is this a good breeder to pull a porter from? Is this going to be a porter that performs and wins me money? And
Mm-hmm.
there is a random factor to all breeds, but there's also, that you'll have to learn that porter and what his natural preferences are, and see how that lines up to the stat racer versus breeder combination. So that's kind of what we're going to go over, and learning the stats is step number one. And just going across the board, starting with speed. This is the overall maximum speed your dog can get to. The maximum speed a hound with 100 speed can get to is 80 kilometers per hour. So whatever your speed number is out of 100 is the percentage of 80 kilometers per hour that your dog is capable of getting. Doesn't mean it will hit it every time. That's going
Mm-hmm.
to be dependent on a lot of other factors, but that is your dog's capability. So a natural 87 speed dog is actually 87% of 80 kilometers per hour natural max potential run speed. That's his top speed. Now, how often he hits top speed or how quickly he hits top speed is all dependent on other stats such as acceleration. Acceleration is the time out of gate that it takes for a dog to ramp up to whatever their top speed is. So, whatever 87% of 80 kilometers per hour, acceleration is a gauged percentage of how fast, out of the maximum possible quickness a dog can have of reaching that top end potential, that your dog can ramp up to that speed out of the gate, whatever your number is. So the lower your percentage is, if you want to make a shotgun 200 meter dog, 87% of 100% speed with a maximum acceleration, it's probably going to top out faster, because to hit 87% is a lot faster than hitting 100%. So a dog with 100 speed isn't going to hit its top speed as quick as a dog with 80% speed and the same 100 acceleration. So making these sprinters, a lot of people prioritize speed first, but you can actually make Franken sprinters by prioritizing leaving your
Um.
dog's lower speed and
Uh-huh.
then capping out that cannon burst out of the gate with a higher percentage draw against their maximum potential speed. And this
Can
is
you
how
see?
those stats kind of correlate.
Can you see my screen?
Let me take a look. See, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So speed is just the overall speed while it's running, right? You said acceleration is so is that the start?
So acceleration is the time out of the gate that it
Yeah.
takes your dog to reach its maximum maximum potential speed. And also, even though it's not in the white
Oh,
papers,
okay.
it has been noticed that it's also the trend of how long it takes to increase speed back up to a ramp up after a slowdown. So when your dog hits
Oh.
mud and slows down, your
Mm.
acceleration is also going to affect how fast it takes your dog to ramp back up to maximum potential speed. So this
So,
is really, really critical to have at least some, as long as you have other stats where you're going to lean into that, and if the breeding lines up, and this is where you analyze, when you learn how the stats correlate to the bloodline, how the
mm-hmm.
bloodline correlates to the parentage, and then you see if it's a dog with a natural affinity to being a very quick dog. That's when some extra acceleration points to double down on what he's good at. If a dog is a naturally amazing sprinter and he comes from a bloodline that's built for sprinting, you could lean into building him as a sprinter, and he's going to be a monster because you're just compounding stats to make a Franken monster. Now he's going to be a one-trick pony. You put him in a
Yeah.
marathon, and he's going to be terrible. But you can utilize these methods to make Franken monster builds that
Yeah.
are going to dominate hounds in paid racing. When you can dictate the conditions and the distances, you can make some Franken monsters to go and bully some people in these races when they're putting these rounded out all around hounds that they're building for tournaments and dailies. If
Yeah.
you wanted to be a bully, you could do so just by building some of these Frankenhounds by prioritizing stat like training
Uh,
based on bloodline and racer configurations, and understanding how these stats all kind of work together and synergize is the first step of that puzzle, and then how that synergizes with the bloodlines is the next step, and then it's the breeder to racer. Once you have all those, you'll be able to analyze pretty quickly if you pull a winner or a dog that's just going to be, a tournament hound or a fair weather performer. But you can really draw some very unique monsters that nobody's tinkered with yet by learning these different stat prioritizations and how they affect your dogs on the track. Your next stat would be endurance, and your endurance is how long your dog is capable of running at your maximum top out speed before it starts to get winded and slow down. So this is like, as the longer the race goes on, so a marathon race, for instance, the longer your dog has to run at 100% speed, the
mm-hmm.
harder it will be for your dog to maintain 100% speed. The
Mm.
higher your endurance, the longer it is. So if you have 100% endurance, that means that you're going to have the guff to run at full tilt for 100% of those distance races if you don't have other RNG factors that slow you down. But you
Oh.
have the capability of capping out for 100% of that race. Now, if you have 98 endurance, that means you have a maximum potential of 98% perfection unless you get critical RNGs,
Uh,
like a critical
RNGs.
success. So RNG rolls, we'll get into that a little bit on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
tracks and how the track algorithm works against these stats. But
Okay.
100 basically makes it to where your maximum potential full tilt run in a marathon race
Mm.
is 100% of the time.
Let me
And
cut you
that's
off
the
real
beauty
quick.
of that endurance.
Yeah, yeah, let me cut you off real there. So, okay, so endurance it should always be recommended to be at 100 then, right?
Endurance is
Or
often
to
touted as the second most important stat over speed.
second.
I would say it is the most important stat if you want to
Yeah.
build a distance racing hound.
Okay, but if you're building a sprinter, you wouldn't really focus on endurance. You would go for speed, or I thought
You would go
acceleration
for
was.
acceleration. Acceleration
Oh,
for if you have a dog that's built for sprints, like
yeah.
meaning you have a dog that you've learned through untrained racing as a natural sprinter
Mm-hmm.
with a black gray coat, which is your top end speed hounds that are going to be those out of the gate sprinters.
Black
And if you
coat,
have that
black
matching
gray.
with a parent that's got a good sprinting, background as well, but it all lines up for that short distance, and you keep that speed at
Mm-hmm.
97, don't even put 3 points into speed to bring it up to 100%, because
Mm-hmm.
now your top potential speed is only 97% of 80 kilometers per hour. So
Mm-hmm.
if your ramp up time is 100% of acceleration, you're going to ramp to that peak speed of 97% faster than that extra 3% distance of trying to get to 100 speed, like everybody that prioritizes training for speed first.
Mm-hmm.
So by knowing your dog is a sprinter before you train, you could leave speed off the equation completely and focus on getting your acceleration up, your
Mm-hmm.
consistency up, and your endurance up so that your dog will cap out and not even drop for a moment from 97% speed in a very high percentage of your races. A lot of people like to focus on speed first because it is the highest weighted stat for racing in dailies or multi-distance races. But if you know that you're building a dog specifically for a sprint, you could leave speed alone. Acceleration is king in the sprints. Now,
Acceleration. Okay.
speed starts to become very, very important in the mids. So the longer distance sprints
Mid.
to the mid range, that's where speed is crucial because that's where having that 97% of maximum potential speed is no longer good enough to close the distance to the finish because by then you have other hounds that are able to hit a little bit faster and ramp up
Mm-hmm.
and keep there and they're going to have that jerk back and forth to speed up and slow down to where they're going to have enough of those to overtake and then stay ahead. And that's when you're going to start to see losses. So that's when
Um,
you would look at acceleration is the speed, the king stat for sprinting. That's
for
acceleration.
sprinting at the
The
blue gray,
king
you said
stat
coat.
for mids would be speed. The
Okay.
king stat
Mid.
for stayer would probably be your consistency
Stair
because
consistency.
that's one of those like mid-long distances where a lot of things can go wrong. Consistency would be very important for those stayers, and endurance would be your prime stat for your marathons because that's the one that
Oh.
determines how long you can run the furthest, the longest, and not lose speed. You combine all those together, and as you build dogs in these ranges, you start to learn which are the secondary most important stats for each, funnel. So then you start to learn what's the best combination with acceleration for a sprinter.
Uh-huh.
Well, I want to make sure that if I catch 300-meter sprints, he's not going to get gassed by the end of that and can maintain 97% of the 80 kilometers per hour that he's going to ramp up to at 100 acceleration. I want to make sure he's going to be able to do that for a 300. So I'm going to prioritize endurance next. But also, I want a sprinter that could win in the sprints that don't have restricted locked conditions. So I'm going to want to also prioritize consistency. So that's when, as a sprinter specific Frankenstein, you have to decide what style of sprinter you want to make. Do you want to make one that's focused on winning at multiple different conditions
Mm-hmm.
across the sprint board, multiple distances across the sprint board? That's when you're learning how to specify which direction you want to go. Endurance will make it to where you're good to cover sprints on your preferred weather and track conditions as on any of the distances. That's
Mm-hmm.
what going into endurance would do, adding acceleration endurance to a sprint specific build. Endurance will make it to where you're now good at 200, 250, and 300, no problem. But if you go consistency, you're going to be good on weather conditions and track surfaces outside of your dog's preferred weather and track conditions, but you're going to struggle at one of those distances on the far spectrum of what your dog's not naturally good at. If that's 200 meters because your dog's a natural sprinter, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be good at the 200 side and start to be a little lackluster on those 300s with some inconsistent performance because you don't have the endurance to keep pace for a full 300 meters. You start to get winded. So that's when you learn, do I want to be a two-trick pony and dump everything into acceleration and
Yeah.
endurance? And do I want to blend it out over acceleration, endurance, and consistency? And that's how you can kind of build your hound for its preference to amplify how good it is. And those are the dogs you see consistently winning Matic. Those are the ones you see
Yeah.
consistently making finals. And a lot of times it's luck early on.
Mm-hmm.
People just get it right. They train it the right way to fit the way it's bred. And when it happens and lines up, that's when people say, hey, I've got a winning hound. But with learning how these dogs are actually bred, you can
Mm-hmm.
actually skip that whole question mark of when it lines up. And you can build some dogs that aren't normally what people would build for that'll actually just line up because that's the way they should be trained.
If you find the preference of a dog, would you solely focus on building it as a full-on sprinter, whatever stayer, or would you kind of diversify it and spread it out with the other
It depends on the breed.
base stats? Okay.
So if I have a mutt that is a wide spectrum build, and what I mean by that is if I have a dog that is a natural sprinter
Okay.
with a coat that's built for, so if I had a blue gray that was a
That's
natural sprinter
blue gray. Okay.
and it came from a black gray coat breeder,
Mm-hmm.
I would have a true mutt around the board as a blue gray dog. That's your middle of the pack performer. It's slower than the black grays, but it is faster than the fawns. It is not as good on multiple conditions as the fawn coats or the orange coats, but it is better than the black gray coat. when it comes to running off of preference and conditions. It's just that middle of the pack performer as the blue gray coat. But if I have a natural sprinter on the blue gray coat, that's teetering into the realm of the black gray side of, being more of a sprinter mid build because that's the shorter distance, like overall quicker hounds. They're not good across multiple conditions. And if it comes from a black gray coat breeder, I now know that I'm going to have a fast blue gray dog that came from a black gray coat. He's got a natural affinity for sprints. I can train him as a sprinter and lean him more into his direction. Now, if I
So what?
had a fawn from a black gray from a blue, you can do all the different algos and see
Oh
how
wow.
that blends.
Uh-huh.
Or you can line it all up and go as pure as you want to go and do a pure blood or a black gray from a black gray and try to pull until you get one with a natural sprint affinity. And that's where you see dogs like Van Dam come into play, the purebred Hickman. It now becomes a 4-stat matching black gray from a black gray coat natural sprinter who now has set so many records and he keeps breaking records that get set left and right. He's one of the best Sunny Hard dogs in the game. And that's where you see those stats start to compound. Whereas you would see, dogs like Not Mason's Amira, which is a high statted Amira that came from George, which is your fawn on fawn breed. And a fawn on fawn code is going to compound onto a dog that's going to make it very hard to learn what its natural preferences are because it's going to run well on a wide spectrum of preferences, not just one set of conditions.
Is this what
And
you're
as
talking
you
about here?
learn,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead,
Van
bud.
Dam, he's one of the top. No, that's not Van Dam. Yeah, that's Van Dam right there. The Hickman Hickman. Um, yeah, one of the record setters. If you look at like his speed spreads, he's a black gray coat from black gray coat with 4 stats matching. When you have matching stats, that's when you have a higher chance of receiving higher RNG pools on those breeds. So that's where you see like just the purebreds run a little stronger, but you also see when you have parentage or bloodlines that tend to match up on those different stats, or not necessarily with bloodlines, but like speed matching speed of the racer to the breeder, you see a little bit better performance in those categories. So this is a 4-stat matcher because his stats matched directly because he was a purebred in the black gray coat, which is your speed hounds, and he
Black gray.
caught
Okay.
natural sprinting. So that's where you just saw everything kind of compound into one. Now he would have done better hitting a 100 acceleration. He got the
Um.
100 speed because everybody chases speed. And it's, that this is a dog you would build as a tournament hound. So you would have to not build him as just a speed hound. But if he would have left that first roll of speed off there, left him at 97 and made sure he hit 100 acceleration,
Mhm.
and then thrown some more into consistency, he would more consistently hit his maximum speed of 97% of 80 kilometers per hour and maintain that speed throughout the entire race. And
Mhm.
it would have made him a more consistent sprinting dog, but he would have not been as much of a marathon runner because if you calculate the 3% that you're losing, it's not a whole lot. So 80 kilometers per hour times what, 0.97. So you're talking 77.6 kilometers per hour. You're missing 2.4 kilometers per hour. Over a marathon distance, though, that adds up. And dogs that can hit a higher top end will overtake and progressively go beyond what your dog's capabilities are because you can't hit that top speed that you need to hit. The longer you race, the
Yeah.
more important speed is. But the most important stat for marathons is endurance. So those are your two most important marathon stats by a long shot, endurance and speed. Consistency is a close third with marathons because consistency affects how often your dog stumbles.
So speed and
Consistency is how good your dog can run off of its natural
consistency.
preferences and how often it stumbles during race triggers. And that is a combined stat between consistency and form.
Oh, consistent. Okay. Oh, that's right. We were talking about off preference
Yep.
of not having your rabbit, right? The correct rabbit. Is that what you
Yep.
meant?
So
Okay.
consistency will be running off a rabbit preference.
Uh
It'll
huh.
be off of weather preference. It'll be off of distance preference. You'll get better RNG rolls or
Mm-hmm.
track difficulty checks as the races go on if you have higher consistency and a high form.
And high form. Okay.
With those two stats combined, so they actually add those stats together,
Mm-hmm.
and those stats calculated together have a roll check against, consider it like a difficulty check, or an
Yeah.
awareness check. And at the different funnels, you have an awareness check of varying difficulties. So the longer a race goes, the distance factor becomes a higher number against the endurance check. And if it overtakes your number, that's when you see a dog slow down. So if
Yeah.
your number is lower than the race number, then this happens. The trigger is your dog slows. If your number is higher, your dog maintains. If your dog is significantly higher, your dog has a chance of critical increase up to maximum speed. And that's when you see those jump ups, like those sprints. Um,
Mm. Oh, those last minute sprints.
Yeah, so that's when you just get that gas. I'm still way,
Oh.
way in the high numbers, and then you hit a low RNG check against your dog.
Yeah.
You still got high endurance, you still got high form, you still got high consistency, and you're running on at least one preference, and boom, your dog just goes into a tailspin and takes off like a banshee. That's when you see
No.
that roll check against your dog critically succeed.
Okay. So you said for maras or marathon runners, speed, endo, and consistency, and this is when you're training it, right?
Yep, yep. This is
Okay.
for training and stat prioritization. And if you're
Okay.
building a marathon racer, you want one that's naturally good at marathon running. So you're going to do your dog discovery, your God
Uh-huh.
rolls, whatever you need to do.
Oh, okay.
And that's when knowing your dog's distance confirmed through a God check can help in knowing how to train your dog if you can get there while it's untrained. This is why, untrained racing, there needs to be an outlet for racing your dog's pre-training against untrained hounds to help them learn these dogs
Yeah.
before people jump the gun and go into training. Because a lot of people rush the process. They train the dogs the same way. Every dog is built differently, and you can prioritize maximizing your earning potential by not wasting your money and mistraining your dogs.
Oh damn, I've done that. I think I did that for that Kikomura also. I don't think I figured
Yeah.
out what the distance preference was. God damn it. Okay.
I mean, typically when you catch a dog worth training, that's a dog worth more than the basement price. Basement
True.
price is 12 Matic. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you're not taking the time to know how to train your dogs right, you're just
Mm-hmm.
wasting 12 Matic. You're
Yeah.
wasting 20 Matic sometimes or 40 Matic sometimes, depending on the value of that hound. So it definitely pays to take your time, learn your dogs, know the bloodlines, know like how these breeds run. Now breeders do have an impact on your dog's preferences and
Mm-hmm.
distance preferences, and we're going to be able to determine those things by calculating as these old boy cup races, people with these final breeders, those are the only
Mm-hmm.
breeders we're going to be able to actually pinpoint what the breeder preferences are and start actually getting compounding analytical data on racers or breeder comparisons. Like, okay, we've seen that this dog, it has a natural affinity towards stayers and marathons and snowy hard track, and we can start to analyze trends in racers that match the traits of these breeders that are racing in these old boy cups by tracking the trends on how they're running. So it's kind of cool now we're seeing these breeders race because we're going to start to be able to extrapolate how exactly the breeders hand down some of these hidden traits to the racers.
Okay. Ooh. Real quick. So I know you kind of broke it down for the training for marathon runners. What about like sprint, middle, stayer, and focusing? Which one more than the other? I know you kind of gave some
Sprint,
already, but
speed is important if you're building, those sprinters towards the 300 side, but so is endurance. I would say for those, speed may be a little more important as a secondary than endurance if you have one that's not really good at the 200 meters.
mm-hmm.
So running your dog untrained, if you find he's a natural sprinter, he will still have a distance he's going to shine at. Could be
Mm-hmm.
200, could be 250, could be 300. And so you can use where he's naturally shining at to either make him better at one of the ones he's not so good at. So if
Oh.
he's good at 250s and you want to
Mm-hmm.
make him a little better at 250s and 300s because you see a trend in 300 meters over 200 meters
Uh-huh.
or the 200 side, that's when it's like, okay, for the short bursts, I can leave it out of speed. If I want to
Okay.
focus on adding in 200s and he's already good at 250s, I don't need to add speed. That's just going to help me get to the 300 meter. What I need to make him better at the 200s is more acceleration. He's got to ramp up to that top
Acceleration.
speed
Okay.
faster. So acceleration is my top priority. Beyond that, I need to go consistency because my dog is having too many stumbles when he's catching races off
Oh yeah.
preference. So he's jumping out of the gate, and I know he's got the acceleration to hit that top speed. He just can't do it because he's a terrible at hail track. How do I make him better
Wow.
at hail? That's when you'll go to consistency to make him better at running off preference.
Oh wow. I didn't even think about all of this. It was just kind of like, oh, all right, let me throw some dogs in a race, and wow. I never thought how in depth it was, and it starts to make more sense when I'm hearing you. Before it was just,
Yeah,
well, I'm not writing anything down. I was just like, oh, listening to you, but starting to write it down, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more clear.
yeah.
Oh wow.
Yep, there's definitely a lot of depth to it, and when you
Yeah.
start to really scrape away the layers of depth, and you can get to the point where you can look at a dog and know its stats just based on all of its features. When you really break down, because every stat correlates to a physical trait on the card. Like looking at Archie, you
Hmm.
can immediately know, okay, he's got bat wing ears, he's an OG, so I know he's got 87 speed. He's got golden eyes, so I know he's got 93 acceleration. He's got a black gray coat, I know he's got 92
Oh
consistency, and he's
yeah.
got a toothy grin mouth, so has a 96 endurance. I can look at that and know he's an OG with those stats, and I don't have to look at his card to
Damn.
know what his base stats are. And you could do that with any OG hound with pure simplicity, knowing that batwing ears are 87 speed, one cocked ear is 89, both ears pointed is
Oh
92,
yeah.
and ears slicked back is 97. And if you know the base stats of those
Jesus.
physical traits, you could just know the traits of every single card. It's really, really simple. And then when you start to build the family lineage, and
Hmm.
understand how those bloodlines are broken down from the top, it's really easy to know, just off the top of your head where every card falls in the ecosystem and archetype of every single bloodline.
Where did you see that? Is it on the
No, I guess I discovered it because
yeah.
nobody knew that they correlated. I got here about a year and a half ish after the game launched, or a year after the game launched, I guess, because they're
Hmm.
coming up on their 2 year. Well, I guess it would have been like 8 months after
Oh yeah,
launch or
2 year.
something. But whatever it was, I noticed it fairly early on that the stats and the traits were trending, and then I put it together and figured out which trait and which stat matched up.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, it's really cool how speed is ears. And
Hmm.
like, and there were people like, what do you mean? Like nobody had known for the whole time before I'd gotten here that the traits and stats matched. And so it was like new territory. It wasn't in any white papers or anything. And then I broke down like how the stats correlate for the other breeds, because they aren't the same as the OGs when it comes to Brendels and Spotties. Because Spotties, so every other OGs, your coat determines your consistency, right?
Okay.
Black gray is 92 consistency, blue gray is 94, and fawn is 96. All black
Black
gray coats have 92 consistency.
92
All blue gray coats
consistency.
have 94 consistency.
Okay,
And
so black
all
gray. This
fawn
is
coats,
uh
yep. And
black
then
gray, right?
the
Okay.
next one, Louis, the blue
Okay,
gray,
blue
he'll
gray.
have
Okay.
94, and
94
all blue grays
consistent.
have 94.
Okay.
And then fawn, Charlotte, will have 96. All fawn
Okay.
coats have 96, regardless of what tier they're in, if they're common, if they're extremely rare, doesn't matter. If it has orange coat, it's got 96 consistency. Now, when you go into
Mm,
brindle territory, they go up to 97 consistency. But
90
they have
Brindle.
weird traits that switch. They have, I believe it's a new spectrum of acceleration. So they have new accelerations that get added, and their physical traits swap. So because their consistency is locked to their coat at 97, they
Mm-hmm.
have their ears and their endurance have an opposite showing tell on, not on Brindles, that's on Spotties, sorry. On Brindles, it's just the 97 consistency, and then they have the new accelerations. Um,
Okay.
actually, click on one. They might have the swapped. Never mind. They might have the swapped.
So
I believe the
it doesn't
Spotties
matter?
are normal. It
Commons
does. Yeah,
or
only the Brindles. It doesn't matter which one.
oh okay.
But
Okay,
yeah,
so
the Brindles have the swap stats. The Spotties hold true, I believe. Yeah.
so this
So
guy
the
here.
brindles are the ones where like the mouth determines the speed. So you know the
Okay.
87 speed mouth, or the
87
92 speed
speed.
mouth is the
Oh yeah,
tongue
no.
out,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So tongue out on a brindle doesn't mean 92 endurance, it means 92 speed.
So there's riff right here, 92 speed. Okay.
The speed and the endurance physical show trait on brindles is
Mhm.
reversed. Speed and endurance are flip-flopped
Speed and endurance or flip flop from who? The spotty?
from brindles. Spotties are
Uh-huh.
normal,
Okay.
but consistency and endurance get flip-flopped
Consistency and endurance. Hold on. Consistency and endurance are flip flop from who?
from
I might.
spotties.
Okay, from spot. Okay.
Oh, yeah. And the reference point is spotties to OGs, brindles to OGs. Which stats are changed?
Mhm.
For brindles, speed and endurance swap. For spotties, endurance and consistency swap. And
Whew.
so what I mean by that is
Yeah.
every spotty has
Mm-hmm.
97 endurance.
97
They're the
endurance.
only
Okay.
breed that their coat does not determine their consistency. It determines their endurance instead.
Endo. Okay.
So every spotty from the lowest common to the highest extremely rare will all have 97 endurance, which means one stat point to try to shoot for 100 endo means your spotties are your statistically most ideal marathon hound because they have the highest chance of having 100 endurance of any other breed. So that means that
Mm-hmm.
when you draw a spotty who has an affinity for marathon racing, you
Mm-hmm.
have a higher percentage chance of reaching 100 endurance than any other breed type. So lining up and matching your dog's natural affinity for marathon and having that 97 endurance means with just one stat point and a reroll opportunity, you can start with endurance and go for 100 endo and lean into your dog's natural affinity as a
Mm-hmm.
marathon runner and make him 100% the best possible marathon runner. And then you would go to speed after that because you would want 100 of both. If you get 100 speed, 100 endurance, marathon bred, spotty,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have a winner. Now, one other thing to think of is as these stats are handed down from the breeders, you want to going to analyze what breeder did your spotty come from.
Okay.
So think about this. What stat do we determine is the most important stat for a marathon hound?
Endo. Or no.
Endo.
Yeah. Endo. Yeah.
You're correct. Endo for marathon. So now we know endurance is the most important stat for a marathon hound, but we
Okay.
also know that endurance and consistency swap on
Endurance and
spotties.
consistency swap. Okay. Spotty.
So
Okay.
if endurance and consistency swap from the OG breeder to the spotty, how do we understand what breeder is the most ideal breeder to pull a spotty from to lean into their natural marathon affinity? What stat do we want to prioritize? High endurance on the breeder? Remember, physical traits and stats correlate.
Mm-hmm.
Physical traits
Oh man.
swap
Uh-huh.
between spotty and OGs. Consistency and endurance flip flop. If you prioritize breeding from a high endurance breeder to hunt for your spotties, you're doing it wrong. That's going to give you a higher natural consistency boost.
Mm-hmm.
You want to prioritize breeding from all fawn breeders. If you're pulling for a spotty, you're going to want to pull from fawns. If you're pulling for a marathon spotty, now
Mm.
don't get me
A
wrong. If
marathon.
you're
Okay.
building a spotty that's if you want a cross the board tournament hound, I'd recommend pulling from blue gray coats. If you're pulling spotties and you want ones for dailies, you want ones for G1s, if you want ones for rhythm of the night, all these
Mm-hmm.
tournaments you can't predict the factors on,
Mm-hmm.
particularly distance.
Yeah.
I like to pull from blue gray coats. Now, fawns are
Blue
great
gray.
for the multiple tournament hound
Blue gray
areas,
coats.
and they're great for pulling from spotties because this is going to be your marathon champs. If you want to do the Franken build of leaning into your dog's natural affinity for a spotty hound, pull from a fawn. Now, the best fawns to pull from are your fawns that have 96 endurance as well. This is where Queen Alberta comes into the conversation. She's high up, and I believe she's got 92.
And she's a rare, right? Oh no, she's a common, right?
She's
Yeah.
a common. Yep, she's
Alberta.
the queen common. She's the highest statted common breeder in the game. Is
Okay,
Alberta,
so
and I believe she has 92
yeah,
um,
I'm sharing it right now.
endurance.
92 endurance.
So that would be a really really good option. And your other top option would be Alfred. Alfred is going to be
92.
your 96, 96, And what's going to make him so good is
96.
those are the stats that swap for marathon. And if you want to build one leaning into prioritizing marathon runners, having that 96 in both slots, when you land a spotty who has a natural affinity for marathons, he's going to have the best possible stat for both of the swapping stats, 96 and 96. He's going to have that juiced up pool in both of the most important marathon stats. If you pull a sprinter, a natural sprinter from a 96-96 prioritized pair of stats, it's not going to ever live up to expectations and will only ever be a so-so dog because you've got a dog that's built wrong. You've got a natural born sprinter from an endurance consistent lined up hound, but he's also a natural sprinter on a dog built for marathon racing.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
Whew. Yeah, I'm trying. I'm like looking up, trying to capture everything you're saying. Oh
Yeah.
man,
So like looking at
that's
OG breeders,
yeah.
it's easy to line up. Hey, I know I want to pull. I need a mid hound. I need a hound that will dominate in these mids. I want to get
Yeah.
into paid racing or
Hmm.
blah 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 blah. So what am I going to pull for mids? Do I want to pull from blue gray to blue gray? Do I want to hunt from one that's going to be really really good across all different mid conditions, but specifically built for a mid performance? Okay, let's go to the fawn line where I know I'm going to have that conditional boost from getting their natural consistency bonuses to run into other weather preferences coming from my,
Consistency.
my mama breeder. And then I'm going to
Oh.
lean into, hunting for a breed that has stats that would line up with how I want to train for mids. How do I
Hmm.
want to train for mids? I need to have some high acceleration. I need to have some high speed. So now, how do I prioritize hunting for a hound with both high speed and high acceleration? Now I need to know I gotta breed this dog from a breeder that has 97 speed and 95
97
acceleration
speed
so
and
that I can
95.
prioritize juicing those pools for the mid performance that I need to ramp up to maximum speed as fast as I can and having that speed fast
Acceleration.
enough to maintain a dominant performance. I got the consistency juice. I don't need to focus so much on
Oh,
endurance because I'm not going any longer than
true, true.
550 meters. So I'm going to focus on those three so I can run in multiple conditions, ramp up to maximum speed, and get there faster than anybody because I'm bred for it, blood for it. And now when you compound all those things,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you get those dogs that everyone's like, ooh, that dog's good at that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
he just happened to line up. But you can strategically try to breed these dogs and then train these dogs when you get the breed that is both the right type of breeder with the right natural running affinity. And people with God breeders can confirm all this data, which is a massive advantage. If you can confirm with God data what your dog's natural preferences are before you train it,
Yeah.
you have a huge leg up in just making that dog a monster even without the right rabbits on it.
So, just to make sure, for all the codes, can you explain which one is does it focus more like when you say the fawns, they're higher on just the endo and the consistency, right?
Yep.
So,
So the OGs kind of had specializations that they were kind of good
oh,
at. And the OGs kind of fall into the fawn coats have the high natural consistency. So they're the best overall tournament hounds that are going to be consistently above average
mm-hmm,
across conditions outside of their natural preferences. So if your dog is a sunny, hard dog stuck on a hail, muddy track, the
mm-hmm,
higher your consistency, the better your dog's chances of having a good race and not falling on his face are.
mm-hmm.
So a fawn will breed a dog naturally better at overcoming those odds in the negative factors that he can run against in a race.
Okay.
Whereas they won't be quite as fast because they're more specialized into, you know, how to stay in their create new lanes instead of just
Yeah.
staying in their lane. The black gray coats
Black
tend
gray.
to have less conditions they're good at running in outside of their natural preferences. But when they're running in their natural preferences, they're very much hard to keep up with, if not impossible to keep up with. And they usually are your record setters when they line up into running within the confines of their track conditions. Whereas your blue grays are kind of your mid-ground balance build. They're going to excel more at those mid-range, mid and stayer ranges that are kind of in that middle ground, because they're not quite as fast as the black grays and they're not quite as good at running in, off of conditions as the fawns, but they're faster than the fawns and better at running off condition than the black grays. And it's kind of that balance build, middle of the ground sacrifice. And then you introduce, your spotties that are a lot better at those, longer distance races with that natural affinity for endurance.
Mm-hmm.
And you have those, brindles that came in with the higher consistency. You can't breed from them, but you can actually breed for the higher consistency that they have to have an even better round the board tournament hound, but they are slower than your black gray by a larger margin, and even slower than your fawns. Those are more your tournament hounds. They're too slow to make an impact in your marathons.
Yeah.
Those are a more on the stayer end kind of dog. The shorter side of stayers is where they really seem to shine, or the longer side of sprints and the shorter end of mids. If they have like a dual range where they excel at. So that like the stayers, or like the distance, like early or late mids, like early stayer range, to the longer stayer early marathons is where they tend to have their range of shine. And then you have your spotties, which are your distance they shine, and their shorter sprints, they are really good. They can almost overtake and keep up and dominate with the black gray coats in the sprint side, the short sprint side. Not quite there, but they can beat just about everybody but the black grays in those sprints, and they dominate in the marathons. And that's kind of like the spread of those. Those are kind of dual spec hounds. One's more functional and prominent than the other because they were easier to breed for. And that was the spotties. The brindles are hard to breed for. People are prioritizing pulling from the wrong commons, and the brindles are end up being crap on the track because they just aren't bred for those combinations.
Okay, so you're saying, wait, I don't know if I heard that right. You said the spotties are good. Okay, so obviously we established a marathon, but also on sprints.
They're really good on the sprints as well because they're fast, but they're not quite as fast as the black grays.
Yeah, yeah.
But because they are almost there, they're way better at the marathons than the black grays. They could dominate just about anybody on marathons consistently. Those spotties tear it up. But the ones that are also good in the sprint side are almost as good as the black grays. So they kind of have like a dual spec on the wide side of the range, whereas the brindles are kind of a dual spec in the mid area. So they're like the mids and the stays is where they float around, whereas the spotties are on the outside of the conal spectrum of performance. So if you think of it like a U shape where you see their performance, you'll see spotties will be good at the sprints and have like a U bucket of peak performance where it usually will dip down a little in the mids and stays and then go up on the marathon side. And that's your average like base performance factor of a spotty. And then as you introduce its natural affinities, so if you have a natural mid-running spotty, that's going to have a bump up in the mid-range for that hound, but it's going to skew his graph to tilt down and make him worse at either sprints or marathons if he was a natural emitter. So he's not going to be quite as good at marathons. He's still going to be okay in the sprints, and the mids are going to peak up, but he's not going to be as good at mids as a dog built for mids will ever be. So he's only ever going to be just a pretty good spotty. He's not ever going to be that spotty that's dominating over and over.
Okay, so let's just say, okay, we established that spotty is good for sprint and marathon, but it's not as good in mid and stayer. So if it was, so that's when that whole Frankenstein thing comes out, where you said you could try to breed it to be good and in mid and stay, but
exactly.
Would there be
if
a purpose for doing
to
that?
balance out the build, exactly, there is a purpose for that. Dailies or send-its. If you want to build a send-it hound, you need to make sure that your dog can get points just about every single day. The only way to do that is to make sure your dog is at least decent at everything. The dogs that are just really good at a few things, they're not going to catch the preferences they need to be relevant, and they're going to miss out on points 3 or 4 days. If you can make top 4 every single day of a 12 race or a 12 heat race, then you're going to make those finals. And that's when making the finals consistently leads to more chances of catching races that line up with your dog's preferences. And when it lines up, that's when your dog goes apeshit and gets the dub. So getting to the show is the strategic play of, you know, having those well built out dogs, those tournament hounds. The strategy for that is getting to the show and then hoping you get a meal you like, you know.
Yeah.
And the play for your, you know, more specific Franken builds is only entering shows I know my dog can compete in, and then letting him shine against other hounds that aren't built for that show. That's the play with building the Frankenhounds, because everybody builds dogs the same way right now. So if you know there's a sprint race that comes up that's a multi-conditional sprints only, you could build a dog built around sprinting and make him Franken built as much as you want
Yeah.
to dominate in just that race. And then that's your only entry every week. And you're going to consistently do well because you have a dog built for sprints. And there's a weekly sprint race that you can just enter and just wipe the floor with everybody else who has to rely on conditions making their dogs perform.
True, true,
The
true. Oh yeah,
more
that's true.
factors you take out of chance, the better your results will be.
But definitely also pricey too if you're trying to find a specific dog that's going to be falling
It's
under all
actually
of that, though, right?
cost saving because I don't recommend hunting for a specific dog. I
Yeah.
recommend knowing what any dog you pull is best usable for.
Mm-hmm.
If you know immediately, hey, I just pulled from a Alberta and I
Okay.
was hunting for, you know, so in Alberta, we know that brindles, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Consistency
Consistent and endo,
and
right?
speed
Oh,
swap
speed.
on brindles. Okay. Alberta's a 92 92. So do you think she would be good to pull and hunt for brindles for? If you want a dog that's good at endurance and speed?
Oh, hold on, hold on. Okay, so you said, whew, okay. All right, can you say that all again? Sorry. So it's good at what? Endo and consistency, or no?
So brindles swap
Uh-huh.
speed and endurance, right?
Speed and
Those are
endurance.
the
Okay.
stats and physical traits that swap on a brindle.
Okay.
Speed and endurance are your marathon stats,
Okay. Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Would you want to pull for endurance and speed of
Endurance and
92 and
speed.
92? Would you want a brindle
Endurance and
to
speed.
race marathons pulling from an Alberta?
No, because the Alberta already has a high
The
what
two
endo and
the two most important stats for marathons are speed and
speed
endurance.
and endurance. Yeah.
And speed and endurance on an Alberta are only tier 3 out of 4. 92 is tier 3 OG speed. 92 is tier 3 endurance. They can both be higher, 97 and 96. Now you can't pull from a 97, 96. Sheba's the only 97 common breeder, and she has 87 endurance, the lowest possible endurance. So she's not an option for pulling for marathon brindles.
92,
So
92.
what are you
Okay.
left with? A 92-96 is all you're left with. A 92-96 will be the best to hunt for brindles for. So then who are you left with? Oh, Alfred.
Alfred. Okay.
Alfred is a 92-96. So now I've moved my position up. If I know I want to hunt for marathon racers and I know an Alfred can pull both brindles and spotties in December, if you get either, it's a
Oh.
win-win because you're now pulling the best combination for a brindle marathon or stayer distance runner too, because speed's going to be good for that stayer and endurance is important for stayer because those are almost as long as marathons, but not quite. So that's where speed is a pretty important factor. Now, Sheba could make some stayer one trick ponies because that speed is very important for the stayer distance, more so than endurance, but her 87 endo is gonna really hurt it. And she's the only common that has 97 speed. So you're stuck with really how do I
Um.
prioritize knowing which stats my breeders have a chance of passing down to their racer babies
Mm-hmm.
and which ones are going to give me the best possible combinations of either a middle of the road dog If I want to pull a balance build dog, that's when you
Hmm.
start hunting for those dogs that are going to amplify the stats that your dog is weak in instead of prioritizing amplifying the stats he's already good in. Those are how you either balance him out or make him, super G and one trick pony and something.
Well, I mean, would there ever be a purpose to breed from a Shiba? I mean, it can't be a coincidence. She's the only different looking dog in the whole
If you
collection,
breed
right?
from a Shiba and you get a spotty that is a natural sprinter, you will
Natural.
have a sprint monster that may be like a secret sauce black gray
Frankenstein.
coat destroyer. Yeah. So
Oh,
like that's one of those factors where, speed for the sprints, she has low acceleration too though. And that's
yeah.
that's where there's the problem of the acceleration issue for the sprint side. But maybe mids, that might actually be like the recipe for making solid mid racing
Oh,
dogs, is
so,
to pull for a Shiba for a mid racer. Wouldn't have quite the acceleration, but it
yeah.
would unlock kind of that later mid, early stayer range of performance for a spotty.
A spotty. You said mid stayer. Being pulled from a Shiba.
Yeah, because remember you have
Whoa,
that
what the hell?
92 consistency on a
Yeah,
Shiba, and
yeah.
consistency and endurance are what swap on a spotty. So
And then,
now you're getting that 92, or what
uh
would
huh,
be a third tier
uh huh.
pull for endurance, which isn't terrible. So now Sheba's giving not only the 97 speed to the spotty, she's giving
Yeah.
92 endurance. Even though she has 87 endurance, she has 92 consistency. But those physical traits of coat and mouth swap.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. Oh wait, when you say swap, you're saying that
The
what
physical
is that
traits are
exactly?
different. So the physical traits
Uh huh.
line up different. So if you pull up a spotty,
Uh huh.
they all have the same stat on their coat of 97.
Endo.
Yeah, on endurance.
Oh, so it wouldn't take the 87.
And
It would take
endurance
the
is their coat.
yeah,
So in every other breed, the coat determines consistency
yeah. Okay. Oh
and the
damn.
mouth determines endurance. But on a spotty, their
Mm-hmm.
mouth determines their consistency
Mm-hmm.
and their coat determines their endurance.
Yeah.
So, coming from a 92 consistency Shiba, her coat stat is 92.
Yeah.
So, this is where Shiba becomes more relevant for
Oh.
building stayer spotties
Huh.
because she
Okay.
gives speed and endurance.
So when it comes to let's say for your training, what would you
Her
start?
speed,
You would
it's
be
not as
putting
high of endurance. You would want a 96 Indo parent for a marathon
96.
runner, but
Okay.
going down to 92 endurance, but amping up to 97 speed is where we take a little bit from that. Think of that like the scale,
Uh huh.
the stayer marathon scale is the shift of stat priority between speed and endurance. As you pull on one, the other goes down or up.
Mm-hmm.
More speed, less endurance is more to the stayer
Oh.
side. More endurance and less speed is more to the marathon side. Even between the two is going to be really good at the farthest stay distance and the
Mm-hmm.
shortest marathon distance. And as you shift that scale one way or the other, it's going to be where in that line of distances and that range it's going to be good at. So if you can kind of picture gliding up back and forth, one stat point up or down in one direction just makes it a little bit better at those.
Okay.
And that kind of makes it easier to imagine, these are the two stats I'm hunting for. So when you learn your dog's a natural marathon runner or confirm it on a god breeder roll, and you could pull up one of your dogs right now that
Okay.
has confirmed even numbers that we've hit on a god roll. So something with a 3, 6, 9, or 12 or 15, anything with an even number on it, so we know for sure what its preferences are.
For wait, so you said it for a god roll?
Yep, yep. So like Dacia, I
Yeah,
believe we have an
yeah,
even number on Dacia.
yeah.
So if you pull up the logs on the even number,
Oh, the logs. Okay, okay, okay.
yep, pull up the log there, and on the one with the even number, we know Dasha is a sprinter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now we can look at what breed Dasha is. What are Dasha's stats? 92, 88, 96, 94. Dasha doesn't have the acceleration to be a naturally good sprinter just based on racer merit. But what parent did Dasha come from? Hickman.
Mm-hmm.
Hickman has 95 acceleration, and he is a black gray coat,
95
the
acceleration.
king of speed. Literally,
Yeah,
there's not
black gray.
another dog,
Mm-hmm.
there's not another breeder built more for sprints than a Hickman. And we see that vindicated by the performance of Van Dam, a purebred Hickman.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, that's right. That's
if
right. That's
if
right.
black gray coats are the king of speed, a natural sprinter is what you need. You got that in this dog. So
Mm-hmm.
your parent is actually helping in a big way, making your dog a better sprinter than it would be as a black gray common with 88 acceleration. So without ever training any acceleration, your dog's going to have a massive boost to its maximum potential acceleration in a race to race. So you're going to notice if you watch back on a lot of Dasha's races,
Mm-hmm.
now looking at her consistency of 94, knowing she comes from a black gray coat, it's an OG to an OG, you're going to have a lot of issues with Dasha running poorly off of her natural race preferences. So if you open up her racer card,
Oh.
you're going to see on the conditions she likes, oh, she's real good at those. She's quick out of the gate and doesn't miss a beat. And on the conditions she doesn't, she shits the bed consistently. And
Yeah.
that's when we see those massive peaks of difference when you see those 10% jumps there when you go from hard to muddy, and how soft is so
Uh,
low. You see
Hard to
those,
muddy.
I
Oh
call
yeah.
them the big middle fingers, when you have one condition that you just dominate face at. And if you go back and watch any race on those conditions
Yeah.
and watch how Dasha races against other dogs that have 88 acceleration, she will shoot out of the gate like a bat out of hell and be a
Mm-hmm.
dog length or two ahead of them because of her parentage and natural affinity as a sprinter. It makes up for her low acceleration. Now, if you ever get to the point where she wins 1,000 Matic and you have to train Dasha, don't be dumb. Leave her speed alone and dump everything into shooting for 100 acceleration because that will make her a cannon. You'll
Mm-hmm.
be able to put that dog into races, a 200-meter race at
Mm-hmm.
92 speed, 100 acceleration coming from a Hickman as a natural sprinter. This dog will have a 200-meter time that will knock the socks off of VR and ER racers. And you
Mm-hmm.
can test that theory by starting with a little bit of acceleration. And then if you want to add some speed later, I would not go to 100. You could put one roll into speed as a secondary thought if you wanted to,
Okay.
but you could actually focus on putting acceleration on this hound when it comes to training time. And 200-meter races, this dog is going to wreck.
Mm-hmm.
It has the maximum possible potential acceleration time out of the gate and in between stumbles. So, with the right training, you can make this dog really good at multiple distances by going the endurance route, by making it really, really quick to get up to maximum speed and
Oh
making
yeah,
sure it
yeah.
doesn't ever get winded. So, if it's 200 meters, 250, or 300, you know your dog's good at sprints. You could enter it in paid sprint, anything's on condition. Or you can go the
Okay.
consistency route and try to start getting those levels between hard and muddy tighter, because hard is a good
Oh.
secondary. You'll start to see that hard will go up to like 15%,
Yeah.
and the muddy will go up to like 30. That'll make you more consistently better when you catch muddy track, because even as good as you run on muddy now, you'll run that much better on those consistency checks because that's extra fluff for those harder rolls that you
Yeah.
wouldn't normally have. See what I'm saying? So when you have more consistency, it gives you a little extra padding. You can go that route, or you can say, nah, I'm going all in. I'm staying off of speed. I'm going to go endurance and I'm going to cover every distance. I don't care about weather. I'm going to focus on distance.
Mm-hmm.
That way, when you, so they have those weather conditional races that pop up.
Yeah.
Like if you know they've got wet track races, why do you care about being good at anything but wet track? If I get a dog that's good at 3 different weather conditions and wet track only, I know I now have a dog that can dominate in those wet races. If I put a little more into consistency to open up his weather spectrum more, he's going to run well no matter what race it is. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care what the weather is. My dog's going to be a top 3 racer. and then you could prioritize building out from there. So recognizing how your dog is built, what your dog's affinity is, will help you know how to train it later to
Mm-hmm.
lean more into what you want that dog to do for you.
Well, just looking at this right now, and I know you were saying, okay, so acceleration. Wouldn't acceleration be first, like you said, endo second, and then speed, or speed because it's 92, then endurance, right?
Well, it just depends on what you want to do.
What's
Because
it?
at 88, so you
Mm-hmm.
got to think about this at 88 acceleration, in
Yeah,
order to get to 100, you need a minimum of 4 spins to get a plus 12.
and
So
you
you
get
need four
five, right?
threes in a row to hit acceleration
Oh,
100.
oh shoot.
This is why people
Oh,
don't prioritize training G force,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
But if you hit 1,000 matic and you wanted to get crazy with it, you could try for science to just do whatever you want someday. And if you want to try it, try it. If you get that perfect plus 12, 3, 3,
Jesus.
3, 3, done, ski, hit that hundo. Now you got three more potential points. You got one roll left. And it
Mm.
depends on what you want to do. And if you look at her stats and you go to the distances, go to her winning distance rate, and you can
Just
see by
okay.
by her sprint distances, she does fuck all as a natural sprinter made for sprinting at the 200-meter side. So what do you
Oh
need
my
to give
God,
her
yeah.
to make her better at 200 meters? You need to make
Acceleration.
her faster. That's her acceleration flaw. But
Oh
once she
yeah.
gets up to speed, she kicks ass like a motherfucker at
Mm-hmm.
250s. So what's the easier solution to make her better at 300 meters? Endurance.
Endurance.
And the
Okay.
reason why she is decent at the 300-meter but sucks at the fucking sprints is because she has 96 endurance but 88
Oh.
acceleration. She's not quick
Oh.
enough to win the short ones, but she's damn sure long-winded enough to do well at the long ones, even though she's not naturally built for them. But by God, you put her somewhere in the middle where she could ramp up to her 92 capped out speed at the maximum possible time and
Yeah.
keep it there for the maximum, like for a little bit longer than those speed demons that had
Mm-hmm.
passed her out of the gate. Now she can win in that middle ground. And you can decide how to train her to make her better in whichever direction you want. You go down to the sprint side, to the 200-meter side,
Mm-hmm.
and go acceleration, you're going to get a sprint bar that looks like a middle finger. It's going to make the
Mm-hmm.
250s go up because anything you train is going to
Oh
make her
yeah, yeah,
better
yeah.
what she's already good at, right? So 250 bar is going to go higher.
Uh-huh.
300 will go higher because it's going to help no matter where you put it, right?
Yeah.
It'll only make your dog better. And then the 200, like 300 might go down over time because, but your dog's not going to get worse at what it's doing. It's just going to do it quicker in between those lulls. But then the 200 is going to come up as the acceleration goes because now your dog's way quicker out of the gate and can reach its maximum speed faster. So you're going to get the middle finger.
Yeah.
And you can decide where it is. Like if your dog, has really good acceleration built for sprints, it comes out the gate with a 200 bar, you get the little pointer finger,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Because then the 250 comes up as you prioritize specking down that way. Or you can get the U shape, the rock and roll or the little half cock
Oh
rock and
yeah.
roll where you put more into endurance but leave the 250s alone. Your dog was good at the twos. So you can really build it out specifically how you want by understanding how your dog is currently racing.
But looking at this, how I mean, how could this be a natural sprinter if it's been losing pretty much every 200?
Because your dog is a natural sprinter but lacks natural acceleration. This is
Yeah.
where your dog, what your dog's natural affinity is, has nothing to do with what stats it has. That is
Okay.
all just determined on mint. It could
Mm.
be a natural anything. This could have been a natural stayer.
Yeah.
There are natural marathoners. This one just happened to line up sprints and come
Mhm.
from a black gray coat, so it lined up perfectly to have the sprint juice, but she just doesn't have the racer acceleration. Her
Yeah.
parental acceleration is what makes her quick enough to ramp up to speed to overtake by the second tier speed
Yeah.
or distance. She just needs that extra 50 meters to overtake the dogs that don't have that endurance to
Yeah.
hang
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
that top speed. So she'll be nipping on their heels, nipping on their heels, nipping on their heels. And by that, 205-meter mark, they start to fall back because they're getting winded, and she just blows past them at the end. And it looks like she goes into a sprint, but what's really happening is the other dog is slowing down. but she
Mm.
maintains that crazy speed and is just pedal to the metal and goes all the way in. It just triggers in weird ways visually. But when
Sure.
you
Yeah.
analyze how the race data plays out and you look at the way that the splits line up,
Mm-hmm.
you can actually go to any race and look at the splits and see exactly the way your dog races.
Oh. But you said that people don't prioritize training commons, right? Or yeah, common G4s, right?
When they hit 1,000 Matic, a lot of people will do a punt train on them and see if they get good rolls, or if they
Yeah.
have dogs that they want to enter in the trained commons. A lot of people are frustrated by the dominance of spotties because spotties, most of the high end common breeders you would want to pull from, a
Mm-hmm.
spotty will work on. And so there's a lot of
Mm.
spotties that lined up right. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're just naturally showing as the better breeder. The
Yeah, I've been
problem
seeing them all
is
over
you
the
have
place.
to breed from the right brindles to get a good brindle runner. And then you can train a brindle differently than you would train another hound
Yeah.
and make it good at what a brindle was built for, those middle distances. But you got to train them for that. You got to know what they're good at, find the ones that are good at a mid or a stayer affinity, preferably a stayer affinity. And then
Mm-hmm.
you can lean into training it as a stayer brindle hound. And you're going to have a hound that would surprise the F out of people
Mm-hmm.
in stayer specific locked distance races.
Oh. Because I was looking at her stats and it's interesting. Yeah, seeing how doesn't win the 200s and also is horrible at rain, and this would fall
Mm-hmm.
on all under consistency, right?
So your weather and your track surface condition is both
Track and
consistency
weather. Okay. Oh, okay. Track and weather consistency.
as well as form. If you have high form, that's
Track,
like a temporary boost to your consistency roll. And they
weather.
are both important to the roll. Form is not a 100% meter, it's a 50% meter. And that tells me it's a pretty heavily weighted factor in that they didn't want it to go so low that it would be so impactful that it would almost be impossible to get out of. They
Yeah.
put a cap of 50% on that meter because the impact is important. And then calculating the two together at varying different distances and workout races, that's when the calculation is basically you add the two together, slice the number in half. Whatever that number is the percentage chance of running well off of your dog's natural preferences. How far off of your natural preferences? You
Mm-hmm.
take the same percentage, but it's a higher weighted number, so you don't see the same impact. So the further off your dog's natural affinity for, say, sunny, whether that's rainy, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
furthest meter point is, you're going to see that scale factor of performance drop from one to, from A to Z, it will scale down to zero to where you perform like shit.
Mm-hmm.
But as you increase your consistency, that brings that meter up for both, but it will bring the meter up on those conditions farther away from your dog's natural affinity.